Okay, we're recording.
Okay.
You can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jason Pizzarello. I'm a playwright, and I also co-founded the playwriting company, digital play publisher Stage Partners, and we focus on new plays and adaptations of classic work for young performers and young audiences.
Yeah. Well, so Jason, I wanted to talk today a little bit about, can we roll it back a little bit for you? When did you first start dabbling in writing plays?
I wrote my first play in high school. I continued acting through college, but focused in the playwriting program at Fordham University. So that was my focus in college. And then shortly after graduating, I started working at Playscripts, which is another play publisher. And I worked there for about 9 years before starting my own play publishing company.
Yeah. What was that like as a beginner, just starting to probably having seen plays, but then taking that jump into trying your hand at writing one?
Yeah, it was kind of amazing at first. I was just blown over by the idea that someone would say something that I wrote down, I could just keep writing things and they would just keep saying them. And so I was hooked at that point, and I was usually in them, and then it kind of just faded where I just found more enjoyment in having more just control over story. And so it's taking a step back behind the table, as it were. And I think I just sort of lost my enjoyment from acting as much. So it was kind of a natural change in that way.
Yeah. Were you able to take those plays that you'd written and try them out in some sort of a forum?
My high school actually had an amazing program that I recommend to every high school, but it was just a night of scenes written by students. So we had a 5-minute time max, and I think one of mine at the end, I think I talked to my director into letting me do a 40-minute play. So I kind of took advantage of that a little bit. But then, so it would just go up. And then in college, too, we had, over the course of school, we probably had about 2 shows put up a year. So that was in a full production. So that was really, and then bringing outside directors. So really getting that experience early on was really key to finding out what actually worked on stage. Something that works on the page is not necessarily going to translate,
Right.
So, yeah.
What, if you could identify maybe specifically for plays and writing plays, what is different from other forms of writing, maybe say a short story or a novel or even screenplays, what for you was kind of something that felt set apart about writing a play?
Well, I think, a play doesn't really, it can exist on a page, but not really. Like, that's not its form, right? It's not sort of sleeping. And, doesn't really come alive, obviously, until people read it. But it's really the audience, which is the other component there that makes theater different than any other medium. And so the experience of a single person watching something is going to be completely different than 100, 200 people. So it's really that live aspect, and then the unpredictability of it. Something can play one night and you do it exactly the same the next night, and it's totally different depending on the audience. So kind of the wild card in the whole game, So I think that is just what gives it a different energy, where you're connecting with people in a different live, unpredictable way.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe it's a specific story, but is there anything you can kind of remember thinking back, things that as you would listen to those lines being performed on stage on different nights, were there things that immediately taught you stuff about the words that you had written?
Like maybe changed how I felt about what I had written. Is that?
Yeah. Or like you said, from night to night, there can be different nuances in the performance depending on the energy, in the room. So
right.
As a young writer, Is there anything you can think back that you maybe specifically learned just from watching that dialogue being portrayed on stage one night and then the next night, maybe a laugh hit one night, but then not the next night, or things like that?
Yeah, I think that's like the death nail for an actor and a writer too, is to play it for laughs, right? So if you try to perform something again the next night that got a laugh previously, like I don't know, I think it's almost guaranteed you're not going to get it. Because you're playing the surface level, you're playing to the joke, and if you're not playing that drama, if you're not playing the stakes, then that it's not going to work, So same with writing. Like if you're just writing for laughs, like there's gonna be no substance. You have to. I forget the author that said this, but that you should always write a comedy as a drama first, and then add jokes in later. Because if you try to write a comedy, it doesn't have that drama underneath it as a foundation, then there's no stakes. So I think just going back to that and what's going on for your character, what do they want, what's the conflict, what are the obstacles they're hitting, just going back to the basic stuff and playing that, and not trying to play to the audience.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great even transition into maybe even specifically how you write. But when you're thinking about a story that you're going to put down on paper, are there some strategies or some ways that you approach developing deep characters that have some substance that go beyond just, a few gags? I mean, how do you approach maybe even character development in your writing style?
Yeah, I think it changes a little bit from play to play. Like some characters you just know and feel, and then others you have to really dig in and sort of build that history of that character. But I guess the important thing to remember always is, like, why are we seeing them in this moment in time? And how has everything that led up to that moment affected and will change how they react to whatever scenario is in front of them. So how did they arrive there? And then why are we seeing that moment? And if you understand their history, the next character come along and say the same lines, and it's going to be different. They're going to react differently to different, to the characters around them. So, like I said, so it changes a little bit on each play. Like some characters you just know better than others, but I think it just goes back to the history, like I said, and then also what do they want in that moment? Like what's driving them forward? And if you just go back to the basics of, like, what does this character want, and that's just going to drive everything, And so you can develop and build that history with every character, but at a certain point, you have to write, and you're going to discover things about them that you didn't know. I think if you're doing it right, if they're able to still surprise you. So you kind of just have to feel like you know them up to a certain point, let go, and then let them sort of go off and become their own, being.
Yeah. Have you found that challenging when you have multiple players in the space and they all have maybe different desires or even contrasting desires? I mean, obviously that conflict is where good stories come from, but have you found it difficult to kind of weave in and out of different character arcs and make them all feel like they're part of that same world, but at the same time have each of them experience either some growth or see their individual personalities, in that same space?
Yeah, I think that's like if you're focusing on the few or two or even one main character's through line, and then that is what you want to hit on the first draft, in my opinion. And then in the second, third, and subsequent drafts, you want to go back and weave that stuff in and color it and make sure that those secondary or tertiary characters are having those arcs and then they have the same stakes, for whatever their scenario is. So I think going back, if you try to get hung up or try to keep all those people in their heads the first draft, I mean, that's just going to slow you down, which is, time is the enemy, first draft. So you're going to knock down those blocks for sure in the first draft.
Yeah. Would you say, because I know for artists, as I know it's true for writers, a lot of them talk about the the blank page that they're facing before they really get started? Are there any, through the years as you've written, are there any strategies or techniques or anything you've employed to help kind of overcome that initial hump of just getting started?
I think it goes back to time for me. How do you conquer time? So to use your advantage, I usually set a time limit. If like, all right, I'm just going to write for 10 minutes right now, and I'm just going to write, and it's going to come out as garbage, and just taking that pressure off. It's just not. No one's going to see this. It's not going to come out the way I want, but I'm just gonna write, and I'm not going to be distracted for 10 minutes. That seems like 10 minutes can turn into 20 minutes, can turn into longer, but make it a small amount of time, doable, and don't stop. And then, I don't know, I've never not been surprised by what comes out and what you're able to accomplish in such a short amount of focused time. So, and once you have something down, then you can rework it or throw it out, but you always feel better for just having written something,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that is key. I mean, I found that on the art end, that if you can just remove that pressure of trying to make it good,
yeah, right,
then like you said, you can just kind of freely throw things out there. And of course, some stuff's going to stick, but a lot of it's going to end up just getting chucked, and that's okay. That's just part of the process.
Right. Like you're never going to arrive at the next version until you go through that first garbage version.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's maybe one of the myths that floats out there with creative people sometimes, or even what is that creative people, but that the clouds are going to part and that the ideas just come pouring out. But of course that's not true. It's always slow, and it takes a lot of time. And even when you have an idea that feels fully formed, it's going to have a lot of evolutions and a lot of different, changes that are going to happen.
Right.
When you approach a play, I know that one of the things that's talked about a lot in all forms of writing is theme. The idea of having a theme or central message that things kind of revolve around. Is that something for you that you feel like that you think about some before you even start writing, or is it something that you think kind of naturally reveals itself as you're writing?
I don't know. Theme is a tough one for me. What's important for me is knowing why I'm writing it. Mm-hmm. Like why am I obsessed with this character? Like, why do I feel like I have to write this? What am I trying to discover or figure out or answer in writing this? And that's where I think theme will naturally like emerge out of those questions. And so I think it is important to know why you're writing something. And of course you can write for fun and just experiment, whatever. But if you're trying to write something that is coming from a deeper place, I think you have to know what you're trying to answer some sort of question,
right.
Personally,
Are there things, and I'm going to make a little adjustment here, Jason.
Okay.
It feels like the sun is blasting my face there. It's all about me. It's all about my appearance, Jason. So
great. Perfect.
So, I mean, I think that's really interesting. I think the idea that, I've heard different things from different writers, right? That like for some people, it's something that maybe are, kind of tumbling around their head before they start. For some, it's almost like a fossil or something where they're digging and they're digging and they're digging. And then at some point, the theme starts to reveal itself. And then when it does reveal itself, then that's something that they can sort of reinforce or thread back into the writing, as they go. But I'm always curious about that because I think that, you don't want to be, or it doesn't feel like you want to be too heavy-handed or too deliberate about like pounding people over the head about like what it is that you're trying to say. You want them to be able to extract from it, like, based on their own experiences. But I don't know, would there be even some advice you'd give to younger writers who are thinking about these things, thinking about, gosh, how do I tell a good story with convincing characters and have it, have some lasting resonance? Or, is there anything that comes to mind about just like kind of getting rolling as you're starting to write?
Yeah. Something that I cause we're always, trying to become a better artist no matter what stage we are. So something that been trying to do personally over this past year is, I wanted to write a new play, and I wanted to arrive at the first draft a lot faster than I had in the past, because I might think about a play for 6 months or a year before I put really words down, and that to me, like, is procrastination, So I think I could have probably written it a lot sooner, So with this last play, I felt like I knew enough about what the play was about and who the characters were. And I was determined to sort of discover that a little later in the process rather than figuring that all out beforehand. So I think there is a danger in doing too much research, and there's just some things that you're not going to know until you jump in,
Right.
So I think not letting yourself be fooled by research, that is a part of writing, but that's not writing really,
right.
And a lot of the real writing is going to come in the rewriting stage, so it's important not to let yourself get caught up, I think, in that early process, and just start putting pen to paper, and realize that you might not feel like you're either the person to write this story, or you don't have enough experience, or you're not the right person to do it. But like if you you want to write the play, you're the right person,
right?
So you just have to have that bit of confidence, and don't let your doubts like fool you, and just jump in.
Yeah, I know with Stage Partners specifically, you guys have a lot of different stories. I mean, you have a lot of different kinds of stories in your collection. Some of them I know are adaptations from classic stories, which I know probably exist in every collection to an extent. Do you have any advice when you're taking something like an Alice in Wonderland, for example, and it's a story that's been told so many different times in so many different ways? Do you have any advice for like adapting works that are classics?
Yeah, I mean, I have an adaptation of Alice in Wonderland that I wrote a long time ago for play scripts, and there were already a lot of versions out there. So obviously, I didn't want to read too many of those, because I didn't want to be influenced by them. And so I think there's a danger there in trying to create something that's, universal or popular. I think you have to, you're adapting anything, but it's definitely something that is well known. Is you have to think about, why are you writing it? Like why are you interested in the story, and what aspects of that story do you want to bring out? And for me with Alice in Wonderland, I wanted to focus on the darker, side of some of the stories and the weirder characters, and so mine's darker and weirder, but that's like, that's what I wanted to, those are the parts that interested me, so yeah. I think you just have to lean into like your own personality of, not that I'm not dark and weird, but not for this interview, but like make it your own, like if you are, like, why are you interested in that story, and then lean into that.
Yeah. I mean, that makes me think about on the art end, there's a lot of question about style and artist style, and where does style come from? And, I'm sure there's answers about that are all over the map, but the most universal thing that I've heard, and also some of my own experience, is that style in art anyways is, something that it's really just kind of where you're most comfortable, writing. It's kind of like what comes most comfortable to you as an illustrator, as an artist. It's not something you have to really consciously think about much. Do you find that that's true when it comes to writing?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, if you're doing it right, I don't think you're not thinking about it too much, and it's, if you're thinking about it too much and you're trying to, it becomes forced, I think,
Right.
So just letting it be sort of underneath the surface there, and it will bubble out,
Yeah. Well, as we know, like, stories are made up of beginnings, middles, and ends. Do you have any thoughts or ideas, or even in your experience through the years of writing plays, ways to create a really engaging, captivating beginning to sort of draw an audience into a play? Are there some things that you've stumbled across in your writing?
Well, I think something to try to do is in the story try to start as late as possible. You know, and I know with 10-minute plays, there's only really a middle and an end, really.
Right.
You kind of like skip over that beginning part. And I think that's, with any scene is the same for any play is how late in the scene can you start, and sort of forget about all the, any kind of exposition or introductions or niceties. Like let all the exposition come out through the conflict later, you know? And the audience likes to figure things out and likes to, be surprised by things. So, withhold, and I think opening with a line, to me, that is somewhat connected. We talked a little about theme, but, opening with something that is kind of the heart of the play, in a subtle way the audience is not going to get, but it might just put a little bug in their ear, I like beginning and endings that reflect each other, and like a mirror image. Even if the audience doesn't realize it, I think just having that arc there. Those are my thoughts on the beginning.
Yeah. Are there any examples either in your writing or even just plays that you've seen of really powerful openings like that?
No, there's not. but there will be now that I've realized that. No, I was thinking of specifically this last play I wrote. I was going back and forth about. It's about a son returning from overseas, and he's returning home, and so he sees his mother when he walks in the door, and she says, "You're home," and so. And he's not really. It's like a play on what's to come, but it sort of hits to what the story, and like just hit it in the first line, I think.
Yeah. Well, what about middles? Because obviously you got to keep your audience along for the ride and develop the characters and
the brutal second act, like in screenplay structure, more like the first act, second act, third act. This is tough, I think it's the middle is all about obstacles, so and amping up the stakes, so once you figure out where the climax is, obviously the beginning, and once you figure out where the climax is, it's like, how do you keep building to that climax? How do you keep amping up the stakes and the obstacles bigger and bigger and bigger till the climax? So if it's not building, then, if you're just carrying the story, then it's not really gonna work, So I think that's the key to me to breaking the second act is the middle is making sure that you're amping up the stakes and that the characters are continuing to struggle in a bigger and bigger way.
Right. Which leads us to the endings.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And having an ending that's satisfying, that feels like it resolves the story to an extent, but maybe doesn't completely resolve the story, or leaves the audience with something to think about. Or what would you say about endings?
Personally, I don't like tying everything up in a bow, so I like to answer enough of what happened for it to be satisfying, for the audience. But sort of like as a new beginning, like you want to, I think, something left for the characters to discover after the end of the play. Like their journey continues on in an interesting way. It's not, so really more the end of a chapter. But obviously you don't want to leave too much of a cliffhanger because that's unsatisfying. But leaving the audience with a little bit of a question, a little bit of a mystery there in the end, I think is personally what I like in a play and what I like to do in my plays.
Right. Well, obviously you've written plays, but then you've also read a lot of plays, seen plays. Are there things and you teach too, and I was thinking about, are there things when you're teaching that you find you like to stress or that you're super passionate about when it comes to writing that maybe they get missed, or maybe they're not talked about enough in the playwriting process?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I find as far as when I'm teaching, and you're working with writers who are maybe just beginning or struggling in the process, it's usually overcoming that blank page, whether it's the fifth page or the 50th page. It's like getting that play done and getting whatever it is, like getting that draft done is the biggest challenge. And that fear and that sense of failure can just be crippling,
Yeah.
So a lot of what I try to focus on is overcoming that with, because that's when you really discover everything about your play is through that process, as far as reading plays or seeing plays, I think as far as reading plays, especially for stage partners and the market of young audiences, young performers, is really understanding that market, and having your plays produced once or twice, and making that leap beyond like the first production, because a lot of people that are writing for that market, they can get the first production, but how does it? Sometimes it's written for a very specific group, a class or a group of young performers, and doesn't necessarily translate in a wider level, So that's something I stress too, is like get that second production, because then you're going to discover, all right, how can this also fit for a totally different group of performers? And because the key with that is getting, propelling past your local circle into a bigger national or international market for students, so making sure it's universal enough, specific but universal enough where it could be tailored to a lot of different groups. So that flexibility is really a key part of it.
Well, I'm intentionally going to avoid asking you the question that writers, from what I've found, that they hate the most, which is, where do your ideas come from? But I will ask you a variation on that.
Okay.
Because I know that creatively, your tank has to get filled somewhere. And for some people, it's places that they go to. For some, it may be going to watch other plays, and maybe they're not writing at the same time they're watching. They're just absorbing a lot. I know for me as an artist, it comes from, if I'm doing Les Mis, rather than regurgitating what's been done 100 times before in a design in Les Mis, it's maybe going to the museum and looking at French Revolutionary paintings and looking at the colors and trying to kind of go back to maybe what are some of those primary sources, to get ideas. But for you specifically, where do you go to kind of get that creative tank filled up when you're maybe gearing up to write a play?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll use my most recent play I've been working on, and I wanted to try to. I was thinking about movies that I have been drawn to over a long period of time, like let's say my two favorite movies, and why I keep going back to those stories, and if I were to try to take elements of those and bring it to the stage, like why. So I think returning to stories that you like and sort of trying to pull out elements of them, whether it's a character or a setting or just a dialogue, and sort of drill down into why you are attracted to that story. And as an exercise, maybe try to combine a bunch of those or try to bring it in. So you could do it with a movie or a book, and then just sort of do a variation on it. So I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about when you're adapting. It's like allowing yourself to embrace what elements you personally are connected to so much. It's like understanding why you like that painting or that piece of music, and then trying to recreate it in your own way.
Yeah. Well, I'll even do a little spin or a little variation on that. So, a lot of times I think you hear in writing, and it's just kind of thrown out there as a phrase, well, write what you know, which I get, because the idea being that you're going to have, I don't know, experiences that are going to help you be informed to then be able to write about that thing in a way that's credible and that, where you really have a foundation to build from. But I've also heard, don't write what you know, write what you love. Mm-hmm. You may not know much about it yet, and that could be some of the fun and the exploration that happens when you're researching, is getting to know more about that and the adventure of finding out about that. Like for you, I mean, maybe what would you say on that generally, but then also for you, what are some of the things that you love that you put into your writing?
Well, it makes me think of something that happened maybe like 20 years ago. It still bothers me a little bit, but it was one of my first plays I put up, and I had some coworkers come see it, and I was still in college, I was like 19, so coworkers being the people who worked at a restaurant. But this guy who considered himself, he's maybe like in his 30s or much more experience in life than me, he saw it, and it was about this guy who ended up as a banker and didn't want to be a banker, and he quit and went on this other adventure. And he said, well, you shouldn't be writing about bankers because you don't know anything about bankers. And I used to work in a bank, and they're nothing like that, and he was a little older than me, so I took it to heart. I was like, wow, maybe I shouldn't be writing about that. It was like, well, the reason I was writing it wasn't to talk about bankers. It's about me not wanting to end up as a banker. Not that there's anything wrong with bankers, but I didn't want to end up as a banker. And so it was about my fear of ending up in what I considered like a dead end job, a non-creative dead end job. And so it was about my fear of that as 19 years old. And so I was writing what I know because I knew about that, but at the time it was like crushing to me that it was like, oh, you're not qualified to write this play, so it goes back to, what you're talking about, like write what you love. And that is writing what you know, and it goes back to what I was saying before, like know why you're writing the play, because you can write about, a gangster you don't have to be a gangster, write about a gangster, but you know who that character is and you're connected to them and you wanted to write about his relationship with his daughter or with, that's maybe something, so, I hate that. I hate that saying.
Yeah. Well, it's really shallow and it, I mean, obviously for people who like to exercise their imagination, I mean, it's really limiting because
look at science fiction. I mean, how there would be no science fiction.
Right. but when you dig down, like you're saying, the themes or the experiences of the characters or the relationships are things that we can be familiar with, and then also be okay with not knowing a lot about and discover more about along the way. Right.
And that's what people are going to connect to him, not because, he's a scientist or because he's bankers, because they, how he's treating people or what he wants, and his journey or his or her journey. And that's what people are going to connect to, not the specifics of which you can find out the specifics of being a banker if that's who you want. I'm talking to you like you're the guy. Like, don't tell me what to do. Well, I totally let it go, and
yeah, that's okay. You can aim it at me if that's what it takes to purge this. For whatever reason, it reminds me a little bit of Monsters Inc., the film Monsters Inc., and something that was, I mean, I think it was maybe a commentary or something later. And of course, I'm diving into film and not theater, but the idea being that I don't think it was until much later that I heard anyone really talking about this theme of parenthood that's just at the root of that story. And they were talking about how, families just ate it up and didn't know why. But then as you kind of peel back the layers, you're like, okay, this is not at all about monsters. This is about this guy who loves his job. And at the same time, now he's being faced with this new challenge of caring for a child, and how's he going to handle that? And all of a sudden this is his new life. And I mean, it's just like, it doesn't even have to be operating on a you're aware of it kind of level for you to really be deeply engrossed in the story and believe in it and understand it and be moved by it, because they are experiences that even if you're not aware that that's the story being told to you.
Right. And that's what's great about, that's why Pixar is the masters. They're the masters of storytelling, because it could be about robots or toys or cars or monsters, and it's not about any of that.
Right.
So, there's just the details of the world, but it's just about, those characters, which could be, you could change the robot to a car or whatever.
Right.
It doesn't matter,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's super empowering for writers, I think especially young writers, to know that they're not being falsely modest when they say these stories are terrible for the first 2 or 3 years that we're developing them. We just give them the time to develop and grow and be rewritten. Right. I mean, I think that inspires me as an artist because, you know, as artists of any kind, whether you're acting, whether you're writing, whatever craft you're pursuing, it's easy to look at those mountains of, you know, gosh, if I could be writing at this level or be able to, like you're talking about the stories that you love. And for whatever reason, the film that popped in my head that I thought maybe you were referring back to is Jurassic Park. And I've since gone back and shared that with my kids. And, you know, as a kid, of course, I'm thrilled about the story, but then as I'm watching it, maybe with a different set of eyes as a storyteller, you're like, wow, I am sitting back in admiration, whether it's just the pure writing or some of it's just the editorial. But like, I think you were commenting on one of our last conversations, you were talking about how tight that storytelling is and how they really have shaved off all the fat. There's nothing in the progression of that story that's not somehow moving the story forward or teaching you something new about a character that you didn't know before. I mean, it's expert storytelling, and, you know, I mean, that's Steven Spielberg, but
yeah, I'm sure there were whole scenes in there, you know, like there are with a lot of great works of art that didn't make it, you know, and so not being too precious with your work, other thing, that, you know, is moving on from the first draft to the next draft is allowing yourself to obviously kill your babies, but that's
murder your darlings.
Your darlings, you know, let them go. And something that was taught to me early on that I try to pass along in some of my classes is open up a different file, a Word file, whatever it is. And if you feel like you need to cut something, but you can't quite let it go, to, you know, copy it and paste it and put it in the other file. You know? And so it doesn't disappear, you know, it's so precious. I guarantee you'll never go back to that file, but it'll help you like move on. And,
it's like writer's therapy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's okay. It's safe over here.
Yeah, it's so precious. And it's a nice little nest over here.
It's going to suffocate over there, but at least it's there.
It's there.
Well, you made a perfect bridge into what I wanted to talk about next, which is editing. Mm-hmm. And a few years back, I read a book, and maybe you've read the book by Stephen King called On Writing.
All right.
Where he talks about the importance of, at the beginning of your writing process, writing with what he calls the door closed.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning that you give yourself that room to explore, to write badly, to get it all down before you ever open it up to other people's criticisms, ideas, even people that are close to you. He talked about just that nurturing state of having that time with the story. And then, of course, you've got to open up the door later and let people who are more objective than you look at the story that you've written. But what would you say about that? Because you're not only a writer, but you're an editor of stories. But what would you say about that process?
Well, I think, you know, if you're it's important to, like, when you have that door open and you're, you know, letting people in to read your work. And, you know, if there seems to be a consensus or like something keeps coming up again, people are asking like, well, why this? And they're pointing to something. And you're holding on to it. I mean, you may be right to hold on to it, but I think you have to ask yourself, why am I holding on to this either piece of dialogue or this character or the story element? You know, is it because I just really, really like it? Or is it because it's important to the character and the story? Like, how does it move the story forward? And if it doesn't, then I think you have to ask yourself if maybe it should be cut, you know, if you can't justify it in that way. And, you know, so a lot of times but I really want to keep this because I really like it, you know, and it goes in that precious stage where you have to maybe you can use it for something else if that, you know, if that happens. But, you know, I think so getting enough feedback from trusted friends and peers to develop some kind of pattern, you know, because you can't just go ahead and make changes that some people want. But if someone keeps coming back to something, I think you look at it and examine it, and try to do it objectively enough where you can say, why do I want this? Why am I fighting for this? You know?
One thing I hear about a lot, you know, especially when it comes to playwriting is, you know, you have to write in a way, and you can tell me if this is true, but you have to write in a way that where you really truly leave room for your actors. Because as writers, especially imaginative writers, it could be tempting to overwrite and to actually describe things far more than they maybe need to be described in terms of stage direction, or maybe it's even in terms of what emotion or how to portray a certain emotion. Is that a part of your editorial process? Is that something you think about? Like, okay, I've written these lines and maybe they feel fine on the page, but how do I maybe trim them back in a way where it's really giving the actor some room to be creative with the role?
I try not to give the actors any room to do anything.
Finally, an honest answer.
They're going to mess it up.
Right. Spoken like a true writer.
I mean, I think, if you're involved in the rehearsal room, you can sort of find that balance between letting them, bring themselves to it and being super controlling, or,
right.
But, and that, are they, is a story being told that you want, and is it being told in the way you want it to be told? And
right.
That's, to me, that's more of a question, a discussion with the director, and if the director understands what you intended, then I try to let the director do their job of having the actor arrive there,
Right.
And as far as putting in stage directions, I think that's a big thing I see a lot of writers trying to say, like, well, you should be feeling this way about this, and like project this emotion, with this line of dialogue. And like, actors are smart most of the time. And no, they really are. And like, I mean, they let them bring themselves to it. You have to, and you're not an architect,
right.
you're a playwright, and part of that means collaboration. And I think
right.
you have to be open, in my opinion, to what the actor as a director might bring to it. And that's the exciting part, because it's not like it's at the heart of theater is collaboration. So
right.
you have to leave a little room there. As far as like in the lines, yeah, if an actor is saying something that they're achieving it in one line, and you've written two lines that do the same thing, then that's a no-brainer. Like, just have the one line, and maybe that's part of your rewriting process. What can be said with less? But
I know that you probably receive submissions and plays, correct?
Yes, some
tips for, like, sort of maybe more technical tips. I don't know if technical is the right word. Maybe it's more like formatting tips for if you're going to submit your play to a publisher, a way that it could just be presented well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of debate about this in the writing community about what is the standard play publishing format. And there are guidelines out there, that it's good to adhere to, but there's also, playwrights who are expressing themselves in a little bit of a different way. And like, it reads differently if, let's say, all the character names are aligned on the left-hand side, I think the key is just to have it be consistent. If you have formatting that's all over the place, then it's going to be hard to read. And so as long as it's consistent and it's not in like color and font, nothing crazy, then, then I think you're good. You're fine, and don't bother trying to put it in the play publisher's format.
Yeah.
Because they'll do that later,
Right.
I think it's just readability is the important thing, and consistency is the key there. So.
Right. If we could use a metaphor here, like a tool belt, or maybe like a toolbox, what should every writer come fully equipped with on their writer's tool belt?
They're going to work on the job site, and they got their hard hat, and you're gonna make
me work for this metaphor.
I am a little bit.
Yeah. Just things that I guess the idea being like things that are readily on hand.
Yeah.
Don't leave home without it. Make sure you're equipped with this when you go to write.
Well, you definitely want to have something to write with and to write on. So, I think you have to know what is the best way for you to write that first draft? I know some people write longhand, so you'd want a pencil and write in your toolbox. And then that second draft comes when they're typing it up, and that is part of their process. Some people obviously write on computers, which is a little bit faster, but I think you're more prone to do editing in that first draft, so you have to figure out, and obviously there's more distractions on the computer. So you have to find out what works for you in that sense, and try out different things. If you're not sure, try out a few different ways, and it may change depending on the piece. But and then I think just building that environment that is going to allow you to write that first draft as easily as possible. So whether that's a closed door, quiet room, that is what you need, then that's what you should have in your toolbox. Or music, I think, is finding the right music to listen to is important to me. So what you can do to tune out the rest of the world. I write on the train a lot because there's no internet, and there's not a lot of people moving around. So I think just finding that environment that is going to allow you to write. And as far as like creative tools,
that's more of what I was thinking about.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Not what software should you use.
Okay. Well, all right. But that is important because, you can come up with all kinds of reasons not to write a first draft, right? So making that is taking away all those distractions and hurdles, is to me the key to getting there. But creatively, you should know at least a baseline of who your characters are. You don't. Some writers like to plot it all out. I know more about the story than the characters when I start. So I start in from the story. Some writers start in from the character angle and don't really know the story. Right. I think you have to, leave room for yourself to be surprised along the way. So know enough about your story and characters to know why we're seeing them and why they're there and what they want, and then just jump in, And so that's, I guess, that's a type of fearlessness. You just have the confidence in yourself just to jump.
Yeah. Well, I have one more question for you.
Okay. Was those enough tools? I feel like, did I cover?
No, you did. And actually, I thought I was going to have to work even harder for the metaphor because you were going very literal on me there for a second with the pencil and
I know.
Paper.
I backed off a little bit.
Yeah. So that's good. But I know in different ways, when it comes to advice, a lot of times, and I think Stephen King even said it in his On Writing book, and you hear it in a lot of different ways from different writers in different mediums, but they say that, the two best things you can do to be a writer is to read a lot and to write a lot. Mm-hmm. When it comes to plays, I would imagine it's not just reading plays, but of course watching plays, because like you said, it's meant to be dramatized. It's not meant to just, be poetry right off the page, although I'm sure some can work evenly in both forms. Mm-hmm. When you go watch plays or when you read plays, what are you looking for? What do you catch yourself noticing? Because you're not just probably watching it purely for the entertainment. I'm sure that storytelling part of your brain kicks in too. Like, what are some of the things that come to mind when you're maybe at a play or reading a play?
Yeah, this is pretty, basic thing, but I want to see a play that could only be a play. I don't want to see something that could exist as a TV show or is trying to be, a movie with a lot of, quick scenes. And, I think there's a tendency for, especially as writers come out of TV, for seeing a handful of those types of plays that really annoy me so much, like, oh, this is short scenes, quick blockouts, a lot of set changes. Like, I don't like any of that stuff. Like, I like theatricality. Yeah. With the, a set can be very theatrical. But I know I'm seeing a play, it's nice to feel transported, but like, I know I'm seeing a play. So yeah. I tend to be drawn to pieces that embrace that theatricality and don't try to be, realistic piece, like some kind of comparison, pale imitation of reality, like just,
Yeah.
embrace the medium, and
what would be a couple, I'll do a variation, like specifically, what would be a couple maybe in the last 5 years that you've seen that you feel like do a good job of that?
The last play probably saw that like just blew me away was Octoroon, and it just, it just broke so many different conventions, and I was transported, but not in a way where I thought I, was in my own reality, so it just had its own world that completely created and then it would break. You think something's going along, it would break it, so that play just blew me away,
Yeah. Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.